Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Deptula, Dean of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies, and welcome to our Aerospace Nation series. We're really pleased today that Lieutenant General Joseph Guastella could join us. As the Air Force Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, General Guastella is responsible for the development and implementation of policy for Air Force operations, force management, training, and readiness. Before he returned to the Pentagon this past August, General Guastella served as the commander of Air Force's Central Command, so he's got some very recent actual operational experience that he brings to the job. So welcome, Gus, and thanks for taking the time to join us today. What I'd like to do is start off by giving you an opportunity to make a few opening remarks on the critical challenges that your team is facing and some of your top priorities as you look to the future. So let me shake the stick, and you got it.
So thank you very much, and actually thanks to all the viewers out there today to take time to listen in, to consider perspectives about air power. And and I say that thank you coming to you as what I consider to be 100% a joint warfighter. I'm a purple guy. I'm a joint warfighter. I appreciate the fact that the air component fights along with all the other services to defend our nation. And I come to you also, though, as an advocate for air power. Not a zealot, but an advocate for air power. And like General Deptula said today, I have a couple viewpoints. The one viewpoint, like as he stated, was the viewpoint as the AFCENT commander, where we operations involved the culmination of the fight in Afghanistan, the defeat ISIS operations, as well as deterrence against Iran. I'm also coming to you, though, as he said, as the Air Force's A3, where we oversee the organizing, training, and equipping of the Air Force. And so with that perspective, I just want to share a couple things up front and then and happily engage in some Q&A. And so, without a doubt, air power is uniquely and I would say disproportionately in demand against the full range of military operations. And so let me share what I'm talking about. Air power is crucial on the full one side of a spectrum. If you start with counterterrorism operations and look at all the counterterrorism work that's been done, air power underpins all of that. Air power has been crucial in countering violent extremist organizations, from Taliban to the defeat ISIS, Al Qaeda, all of that. Air power has underpinned every aspect of it. Air power is also, from the height of the surge in Iraq and the height of the surge in Afghanistan, air power overlays those counterinsurgency operations, the wars of our generation, if you will. But also for named operations, and then as you move into operational plans, and certainly major war, as you pivot to the NDS or any thought of nuclear war, there's not a single aspect of war fighting, not a single range of military operations that the air power doesn't underpin and isn't in demand in every piece of it. And the other thing that I've noticed is that as an airman, I don't have to go around advocating for the Air Force. I actually have the best advocates, and it's called the Joint Force. Every combatant command comes online and says, we need air power, or they see, hey, we're gonna diminish the involvement in CENTCOM. They read about that, or they see some of the changes that are making, and they don't say, okay, good, go home. No, they say, no, I want that air power. I haven't had enough. And I'm talking about an appetite that ranges from our most low-end permissive platforms, RPAs, airlift, all the way through the full spectrum of fifth-gen fighters and advanced bombers and everything in between. And so it's actually good to be in demand. And I don't have to state my own demand. It's actually being done for us. And so anyway, I look forward to the opportunity to discuss any of those topics today, sir, with you or any of the Q&A that may occur afterwards. Oh.
No, that sounds great, Gus. Really appreciate that and all that you and your A3 team is doing. So let's jump into detail about some of the Air Force's operational challenges. As you alluded to, and if I may summarize, the Air Force has become the truly indispensable element of joint force operations, because no joint force operation can be conducted as you said, without some element of the Department of the Air Force being involved. And frankly, that cannot be said about any other department. In this sense, the whole of the Department of Defense and the other services have a stake in the Air Force's ability to conduct its mission. Accordingly, shouldn't the Air Force then step up advocacy for a greater share of the defense budget? I mean, the Air Force currently receives significantly less total obligational authority than any of the other departments due to $40 billion worth of pass-through that goes to the intelligence community. And we find ourselves in a situation today where the Navy has no problem asking for nearly a doubling of the size of its force and making the case for an increased top line. And all the other services are encroaching on the Air Force's long-range strike mission. So isn't it time to throw down the BS flag on these moves and make the case for more top line for the Air Force?
Well, whether I don't necessarily look for a fight between services. That's the last thing I want to do. What I want to do is have the department look at the demands placed upon the Air Force. What are the expectations of our Air Force, and allow that demand to drive where the resources go. And let's as opposed to stating the Air Force needs more, let's look at the facts, okay? And the facts are, like I stated up front, we're in demand. So whether you are wed to the NDA and every aspect of pivoting to the high-end threat, that again, all of that is underpinned by the Air Force. Holding targets at risk at countries, the true deterrent value is done in the predominance by Air Force fires for the volume of fires that we can sustain. Us pursuing 5th-gen weapon systems, whether they be fighters or advanced bombers and higher-end RPA type of aircraft, that is what holds targets at risk. So if you pivot to an NDA type of mentality, it's Air Force. But let's say you're not as wed to the NDA. Let's say that you are someone who says, you know what, we really need to continue more of the status quo. We need a very robust CT. We need to be able to do multiple high-scaled, a large degree of violent extremist organizations and handle that and be able to do more Iraq and Afghanistan counterinsurgencies. Well, guess what? You're asking for air power. Or even if you fall somewhere in the middle. So yeah, we need to be a little bit of both, right? Well, guess what? You're asking for air power. I cannot envision a single future of security for our nation that doesn't involve air power. There's not. And so as a result, though, but here's the interesting thing, sir, is that think of it, okay, we're a football team and they always want us on the field, okay? On every field, they always want us out playing. But if they always want us in the field, if every combatant command wants the Air Force, how can we possibly do that? If we can't come back and recapitalize, if we can't come back and grow, if we can't modernize, right? We need to be resourced. We need to be the right size, and we need to be resourced. And so that'd be my approach to the discussion on how well we're funded.
I think that's very well said. And you underline again the point that the Department of the Air Force has become the indispensable force. And accordingly, if and it's a great approach. I mean, if the combatant commanders are going to get what it is that they need, then this organization that provides it needs the resources to be able to give them what they need across the spectrum. Let's talk just a little bit about the Air Force's planning force, if you will. And that's 386 squadrons. The objective of that number was defined, and that goal was defined as the answer to a congressional inquiry as to what the Air Force really needed to accomplish the national defense strategy at moderate risk, and not with no risk, but at moderate risk. And it's about 24% greater than the force structure that the Air Force currently possesses. Now, some people out there have been arguing to back off from this number because it's not affordable within current budget projections. But that's exactly the point, isn't it? To highlight the difference from where we are and what we actually need to meet the defense strategy. It's not time to say we need less than we actually do just to meet arbitrary budget bogeys. What do you say to that in the context when people are arguing about the fact that, or they're making the case that we ought to roll off the 3 out of 86 number?
Well, I've seen the NDA language that states 386. I've seen that the number previously thrown out there, and I'm not saying that's exactly the number, but without a doubt, the demand signal requires a larger capacity, which requires a larger Air Force. I'm happy to tell you which force elements, which squadrons to get rid of, if you can tell me which missions we no longer need to do for the nation. I'm dying to find out where we can get relief. I'm dying for the combatant command that says, you know what, we really don't need that type of air power anymore. It doesn't exist. And it starts right here at the homeland. Every single day, Air Force fighter squadrons are on alert, defending everything from the Super Bowl to the inauguration to every major city to the major infrastructure. They're defending America every single day. That's not a mission we'll ever walk away from. Every single day, American Air Force is out there with two legs of the triad. It's actually 2.5 legs of the triad. It's our nuclear arsenal that keeps us absolutely secure against the most grave threats. That's every day, unchanging, as it's been for a long time. But then you look across the other combatant commands. If you're asking, hey, what's going on and what we need to do, we need to increase naval presence in the South China Sea. If you need to counter Russian opportunism or aggression, all of that is underwritten by air power. And then, of course, there are some that are thinking, hey, we really should be slow to leave the Middle East. We need to really stay there and ensure that the efforts we've made don't roll back. Well, what underpins that? It's air power. From the height of the surge, from when we had 100,000 troops in Iraq or in Afghanistan, we had air power over the top of that. Well, it doesn't matter if you have 100,000 troops or 1,000 troops. You need to be protected. They need ISR. They need airlift. They need everything the Air Force provides. And so my point, though, is that we are in demand, and there's no area to go to that I can foresee, no matter what your viewpoint is, that allows us to take risk to reduce in our size, in capacity. I would argue we have to be larger to address some of these things, or tell us what we shouldn't do. But there's more to it. There's also the need to modernize. We cannot continue to fly airplanes that are equivalent of 80-year-olds on a football field. We need to be able to modernize, and we need to be able to put 20-year-old athletes out there that are capable against the high-end threats. And that's a whole nother area of discussion, but I'll stop there based on your question.
No, thanks very much. It just reiterates the point. The bottom line is 386 is not about what we can afford today in the current arbitrarily defined budget levels. It essentially is the planning force in answer to the question of what it is that we need to actually accomplish the national defense strategy. Okay, kind of following on the line of resourcing, some believe that the Air Force will have to endure future budget cuts. Now, optimists out there might say that it can be done without severely affecting the Air Force's most critical missions or its modernization efforts. In other words, they believe that there's acceptable risk in retiring older aircraft and that cutting more force structure will free up funding for new procurement. Now, most of us have been around the Air Force for a while, understand that approach has been tried before. And in every case, the Air Force always lost both current force structure that it offered up and the future savings that it freed up, because bottom line, the Air Force ultimately does not control the budget. It belongs to OSD, OMB, and Congress, who strip out savings and divert them. So what are your thoughts on this subject area?
Well, I agree that there is no easy way within the Air Force's top line to address these things. And I said, the demand signal for us is significant. And I've been through. I built multiple POMs when and built multiple budget submissions here, and in times of fiscal austerity. And I've been through many efficiency drills where you try to squeeze as much out of a service as possible so that you can preserve, get rid of tail and preserve tooth. And I can tell you, there's been a tremendous amount of work done to try to do all that. And I'd say without a doubt, we need an Air Force that has a capacity to solve the demands of our nation and the requirements placed upon it. And we need an Air Force that's capable in the threats that we face in the future. So both of those are bills. I would say the only area where we can afford to take risk as an Air Force is in infrastructure. We have excessive amounts of bases across our nation that we have to keep open. We're able to consolidate some of that, to have fewer locations that we're operating out of. That may be an area that we could realize some resources, but that's also a difficult challenge because I know that there's a lot of interest in those bases and where they are. But that's an example of the difficult position that we're in. We're in demand, and we need to modernize for a future threat, and we can't really consolidate ourselves, so that we need help in these areas, or we need the resources.
Yeah, I got that. Let me push back just a little bit, or just offer another perspective for your consideration. And this is on the infrastructure piece. You know, that argument's been made by folks inside the military across the board. All the services have about 25% excess infrastructure. But if we're not at the size of where we are, where we need to be to meet the needs of the national security strategy, and we need to grow, and we got rid of the infrastructure, where would we grow to? You know, I've been, well, that's something else to consider. I'll just leave it there in the interest of time, but it's a wonderful area for discussion. Something near and dear to your heart, having just come back from CENTCOM, and experienced air bases under attack, given the cost effectiveness of airstrikes relative to any other form of lethal power projection and the growing threats to air bases out there, do you believe that the Army could significantly contribute to joint operations by fulfilling one of their original missions of air-based defense? Let me give you an example. Recently, we saw the M109A7 Paladin howitzer demonstrate the ability to shoot down cruise missiles. If that's the case, shouldn't OPCON or operational control of those systems be transferred to the Joint Force Air Component Commander during potential crises where air bases come under attack?
That's a great question. That entire discussion about defense, and I definitely have a viewpoint on that I think needs to be shared and understood and discussed. And that is, for the wars of our generation over the last few decades, air power has been in many cases viewed as a supporting service, because what do? It's been a very land-centric set of campaigns, where it's a counterinsurgency, counter VEO. So what is air? We are support. We provide close air support. We provide airlift. We provide ISR. We provide personal recovery. We provide airborne electronic warfare, and we provide command and control of all that, by the way. And because this Department of the Air Force, we're expected to provide GPS, satellite communications, missile warning, and of course, intelligence from space. Those are all requirements asked of the Air Force, the Department of Air Force. What requirement does the Air Force levy upon the Joint Force? I'll tell you, it's called protection. We need our airfields to be defended. We need the population centers have to be defended, clearly, if we're in forward areas. We need ports to be defended. We need a critical infrastructure to be defended, and not against, yesterday's threats. We needed to think about the threats of the future, and how our ability to, if you want airlift, close air support, ISR, electronic warfare, if you want all that, the airfields have to be defended. And so future concepts have to show ways and identify ways to defend those things. And it's not necessarily that who controls it. It's we have to invest in technologies that will allow affordable defense from the lowest end threats, from the small little UASs that you see flying around, to a more robust UAS that can fly 1,000 kilometers, to a regional ballistic missile, or even an intercontinental ballistic missile. There are ways to defend against those things, but we have to pursue that as a joint force. And I would argue that's the tax. If you want air power, if you want space power, then you have to be able to defend it.
Very well put. I applaud you for advocating and articulating that perspective, particularly in an arena where we see the other services encroaching on the Air Force's mission of long-range precision strike, when they ought to be focusing on what their own core functions are, as well as being interdependent in the context of providing capabilities across all of the service components, because we do fight in a joint fashion. Okay, in that regard,
On one thing though, but
yeah.
they said, so hey, as a, as someone who, someone who's involved in, in combat operations in the Middle East, to include the named operations and our deterrent work against Iran, there's no combatant commander that doesn't value fires, right? I welcome any service that comes to the Long Range Fires Club. I'd like to say the Air Force has been in the Long Range Fires Club for 100 years, and we've done exceptionally well, but I welcome more additional fires. But the difficult part is that it has to be affordable. The additions to the in efforts to provide long range fires have to be cost effective, and I would argue right now the Air Force is a fantastic opportunity with our bomber fleet, with our robust fighter fleet, to provide the platform from which a variety of long-range fires can be employed from. We already have the infrastructure, the airfields, the munitions, the storage facilities. We already have the launchers called the airplanes. It's a matter of developing technologies and missiles that can hold any target at risk, from hypersonics to low observables, and the full spectrum of fires. We're the service of choice for that. And so, again, I welcome any service to that, but it has to be cost effective and affordable for us to pursue as a Department of Defense.
Well, I agree 1,000%, but that's the entire point. Well, it's one of the points, is that we need to take an effects-based look at in putting effectiveness back into the cost effectiveness equation. Missiles are multi-million dollars a shot. In one shot, they're gone and dispensed with. They're not reusable. To put this very simply, airplanes are reusable. And what people tend to forget is you cannot conduct a major regional contingency with standoff or missiles alone. Desert Storm, of which we're coming up on the 30th year anniversary, consisted of about 40 to 50,000 aim points. If you look at a contingency in South China Sea or Europe, that is a major contingency, you could be looking at upwards of 100,000 aim points. You don't do that with missiles. So discipline, I hear you on, welcome fires, particularly if it's done in a joint approach. However, discipline needs to be imposed on the services by the Secretary of Defense, because we need each of the capabilities that each of the services provide. And they're all running to the latest shiny object, which is long-range fires. Anyway, speaking of joint warfighting constructs, word on the street is that when recently wargamed, the proposed joint warfighting construct didn't fare very well. And perhaps part of that is due to the fact that air power was not incorporated into the concept or the war game to the degree that might optimize its potential. If in fact that's the case, do we have people in the Air Force, when you go to OPSTEP tanks, are you willing to critically non-concur on the proposed joint warfighting construct, if in fact that's deserved?
Well, I'm certainly not going to comment on ongoing war games that we do at classified levels in the Pentagon. But I can assure all the viewers this: we are 100% focused on developing not only the technologies but the approaches to prevail in the high-end fights. Okay, and that means iteration. So we'll try things. They may work, they may not work, and we'll go back and reevaluate that. It's something we're taking very seriously. We're doing it in a joint approach, without a doubt, there's having a better understanding of how to apply air power in a high-end environment is something that we need to continue to fight for. Because when you think about it, the memories and the understanding of a lot of the leadership, and me included, has been focused on the low-end counterinsurgency fights, the wars of our generation. And so only recently have we pivoted to thinking about how to truly deter and defeat a high-end adversary. And so we have to change the thinking. And that it means we have to change how we use air power. Okay. And what is the shape of the Air Force, and so what may have been effective in yesteryear's campaign may not be the optimum investment in the future. And getting that balance just right is something that the joint warfighting games, those efforts help us expose.
Yeah, very good. Well said, Gus. Um, let's turn a bit to one of an area that's of a great interest nowadays, and that's the Advanced Battle Management System. It recently conducted a demonstration during Valiant Shield 2020 in the Indo-Pacific region. When do you estimate that we'll get beyond the demonstration phase to where we can expect to see uh, actual incorporation in operational day-to-day events? Given your experience as the former CJFAC in an active area of operations, what did this exercise tell us about where the Air Force needs to be in terms of competing with China and other potential adversaries?
Well, I think some of the technologies and some of the thinking that's involved in ABMS and all of our what we call JADC2, our effort to improve our ability to fight all domains. There's some incredibly promising work that's going on, and the good news is the approach that the Air Force has used in ABMS is that let's go fast, and it's okay to fail. It's okay to experiment with a technology that ends up being a dead end, but it's important that we explore many different avenues to figure out what indeed would be the game-changing effects that we have. For any campaign today or in the future, you want very rapid decision making. You want to be decisions to push to the lowest possible level. You like our chief of staff has said, we want to connect sensors and shooters. We want to connect the right sensors to the right shooters, and ABMS is showing us ways to do that. Where systems, we're going to be fighting with legacy weapon systems for a long time, but we're going to be bolting on technologies to make those weapon systems more compatible, more interoperable. And that's the value of ABMS. Is we may be fighting with some brand new exquisite equipment that was kind of baked in from the beginning, but we're also going to be flying with B-52s, and everything needs, we know how old they are, right? So all of our weapon systems, whether it be legacy or new, needs to be interconnected, and it needs to reduce the amount of time to create effects on targets. And I think that's the value of ABMS in the work that's going on there.
Yeah, just for, you understand how old they are, but just for the audience edification, the youngest B-52 is 58 years, excuse me, it gets me choked up just talking about it, is 58 years old. All right.
But for the audience, so think about this. The cost of maintaining legacy weapon systems increases over time. And think about the health care that an 80 or 90-year-old needs. It's probably a lot more expensive health care than a 20-year-old needs. Okay. And so if you're going to maintain fleets of legacy, very aged aircraft, they need time on this, they need downtime. They need dry dock. They need maintenance, right? And to sustain the demands that are placed upon us. And so that's why it's a constant struggle to address the demands that our nation asks of us, all the combatant demands, but at the same time maintain fleets that are viable, and then also eventually modernize.
Yeah. By the way, that's a great analogy. I'm going to start using that one because it really drives it home. In terms of healthcare costs between a 20-year-old and an 80-year-old. But on the subject of age, I'll just also make the point, as I have been getting older, that age is a state of mind too, okay? So you can still think young, although the body starts to wear out. All right, let's shift to readiness. A recent study by the General Accounting Office stated that just 3 of 46 aircraft across each of the services met their annual mission capable goals between 2011 and 2019. As the Air Force prepares for an era of near peer competition, what are you guys doing to ensure that you've got enough aircraft ready to fly and fight?
No, without a doubt, the aircraft maintainability and availability is core. We work hand in hand with my counterpart in the A4 and the entire sustainability community maintenance enterprise to work on the problems that I just addressed. When you think the time frame that you just mentioned, 2011 to 2019, what did we see? We saw the tail end of a surge in Afghanistan with 100,000+ troops, demand for air power off the chart. Did that change? Well, not really, because as we remained in the Middle East with a presence, even though we weren't actively fighting on the ground as much, we certainly needed the air overlay, so we had to keep the players on the field. And then, of course, we had the Defeat ISIS campaign, which that Defeat ISIS campaign, especially in the closing aspect of that, is 100% air power, air delivered munitions taking out ISIS, because no one wants to go door to door with that cancer. And so the demands on the Air Force from that time period put a lot of the force in the field. And as a result, our ability to maintain it is certainly challenged. And so, but I know our maintenance community has done a heck of a lot. We put some resources into our weapon system sustainment, really to get the training levels up where they need to be, to get the part levels up where they need to be, to try to address the most critical weapon systems. But, you know, if you never take a team off a field, it's hard to get healthy.
Yeah, it's another great analogy that you had on the football team. If you had the offensive team out there the whole game, well, forget it. Just have both sides out there. They run out of steam. A bit of a follow-up in testimony in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee this past May, Chief Brown said the Air Force was moving away from the 80% readiness rate identified in the 2018 National Defense Strategy. Could you speak to that number, and how does the Air Force writ large approach readiness numbers today?
Well, obviously, readiness is always front and center for me and for the Air Force and for the entire enterprise. And I'll tell you this right up front: the Air Force is ready to defend our nation, and that's something that will never not allow to happen for us. Now, the readiness is a very challenging area to discuss, because you have to think about all the facets to readiness. You know, there's the resource readiness. Do you have the parts, the air crew, the training, the supplies you need to be ready? And then the question is, ready for what, right? Are you ready for the wars of our generation and to continue to support land-centric operations where you have air supremacy in the Middle East? Or are you ready for a high-end fight against a peer competitor? Because you have to train for those different things. And I would argue we're working very hard on elevating our readiness for the high-end fight, because what that does is that's the deterrent value that Air Force provides. If we can show that we can hold targets at risk in any country, they know they're not going to mess with the USA, and that's what air power does. And so the readiness effort has been to shift away from readiness for a lower end campaign and actually take not only the weapon systems but the air crew and elevate their game so they have training opportunities for more of a high end fight.
Excellent. Thanks for that insight. Speaking of being ready for stuff, Russian military aircraft intercepts of our Air Force aircraft in the Arctic region and in Europe are occurring with increasing frequency. And you know, any time that happens, it potentially leads to dangerous situations. So how are these incidents impacting Air Force ops today, and what are we doing to minimize the risk of any potential escalation?
Well, I mean, I think it's we're flying in international airspace, and if Russia wants to come out and meet us out there, that's fine. Those intercepts absolutely need to be professional, and they know that. And sometimes they're not. But you know what? They're welcome to come out there and intercept us. The key thing is this: is that we're not going to shy away from flying in international airspace. We're going to continue to fly in the Arctic and in Europe and around the world wherever we're needed to assure our partners and transmit the fact that we can generate air power globally. And we're going to continue to do it. So I wouldn't say it's really affecting us at all. We will certainly call them out if there's inappropriate or unsafe intercepts that occur, but we're not going to shy away from it. It's important that we stay out there. But I'll say this, though, this is because you mentioned the Arctic. It would be very, very naive to think that the Arctic is a sanctuary that will never be encroached upon by military operations. Okay, that would be as naive as to say that space is a domain that no one will go to. No adversary will go there and threaten us, so let's not go there either. But both of those things are incredibly naive to think that we would not need at some point to be able to meet and deter aggression in the Arctic or certainly in space. And that I'm very fortunate that we've made the decisions to address those areas, because we keep our nation secure by being able to defend in all domains, from cyber to space and everything in between.
Great insight again. And but speaking of intercepts, before coming the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, you're the commander of Air Force's Central Command when Iran downed a USRQ-4 Global Hawk in June of 19. When you look back on that incident today, what does it tell us about the current and future operating environment?
Well, let me first say that that was completely irresponsible and aggressive behavior by a state actor. What kind of a neighbor in the neighborhood would shoot down an airplane in international waters with airliners and civilians flying in that airspace? Unbelievably irresponsible behavior that regime engaged in. And we could see it happened again when they shot down their own airliner. Back in January. And so, so we have a rogue regime with Iran. And so clearly we had to address that, and we did. But the point, though, is that, I think your question is, about is your question actually about the RPAs themselves, or what exactly is the question, I think, on that one?
Well, what just sort of that incident, having that aircraft shot down by a mid-level player, what does that indicate regarding not just the future operating environment? I guess what I'm getting at is that really wasn't that contested of an environment, yet here we have one of our premier systems getting shot down. What does that tell us about a kind of future where we're going to have much more significant defenses that we have to operate against?
Oh no, that's a great point. Yeah. So the RPA that we were operating, the BAMSD was a Navy asset, was operating in international airspace, completely legitimate and allowed to be there. And like I said, they were engaged by the state actor. But the point, though, is that, and I think your point is spot on. We have incredibly effective RPAs that were designed for permissive environments. And they perform incredibly well in environments that you don't have contested airspace. You don't have fighters coming up and shooting them down. You certainly don't have fifth generation fighters threatening them, and you don't have a robust IADS. But if you're going to operate those platforms in contested environments, then they're going to be at risk. Okay, to various degrees. And so it's important that we seek a balance between RPAs that are designed for permissive environments and RPAs that can be developed for more threatened or high-end environments. And getting that balance right, I think, is very important.
On the subject of remotely piloted aircraft, UAVs, drones, whatever folks would like to call them, some were surprised this past year that the Air Force proposed cutting the MQ-9 Reaper production short and reducing combat caps by 10. It seems for a small investment, the Reaper can gain mission assurance to remain viable in a world where the COCOMs, as you talked about, are asking for more, not less. Will Reaper become a bill payer for other systems, or is it going to remain a mainstay for counterinsurgency and counter-terror ops, and perhaps even more?
Well, I think the Reaper fleet is healthy and robust, and it will remain a critical part of our force for a decade. It's an exceptionally effective platform, as we've all seen, from the counterterrorism role to the deterrence role, because if it allows for Reaper allows attribution, it has a deterrent value, and its ISR value and its kinetic value, they're incredibly valuable platforms. But at the same time, like I've said before, they're designed for more permissive environments, and so we'll need a balance. We'll need a balance of the right size, like I said, permissive RPA fleet, which isn't just the Reaper. There's a multiple aircraft that fall into that category, as well as RPAs that are designed for a contested environment that can operate from the threats that a country like Iran would pose, or even more high-end threats like China or Russia, so that we maintain our deterrent capability vis-a-vis those state actors.
Well, Lieutenant General Guastella, I really appreciate your comments on these critical issues. You've been very straightforward and succinct, and we need more of that in terms of Air Force leadership getting out there and being very specific in terms of what not just the Air Force needs, but how the Air Force needs to be supported to be able to continue its role as a critical partner in joint force operations. So on behalf of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies, we really wish you the very best as you continue to deal with the challenges that affect the security and well-being of every American. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir.
You bet. Now, as a reminder to our listeners, we'll be hosting our Electronic Warfare Electromagnetic Spectrum Roundtable tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. So we hope that you'll join us for that. And our next Aerospace Nation event is a discussion with the Air Force Chief Scientist, and that'll take place on Thursday, December 17th. Thank you. Okay, Gus, what we're going to do now is open the session to questions from the audience who've been listening to our conversation. And as a reminder to our audience members, we please ask that if you have a question, use the raise hand function on your computer. And then when I call on you, state your name and your organization. And we'll kick off the questioning with Mr. John Turpak.
Good morning, General. Can you hear me?
Hey, John, I have you loud and clear. Go ahead.
Good, sir. So there was recently a very expansive and comprehensive study of military aviation accidents. Basically that they've been on the increase, paralleling the increase in operations, op tempo. What are your takeaways from that report? What is the action plan to get safety under control? Basically, how do you respond to that study?
Hey, John, thank you for the question. I have not read that study myself. I'm familiar with it, but I have not read all of it right now. But I'll tell you this: aviation safety in the United States Air Force has been front and center of our thinking for decades and decades. And I would like to say, the safety events, mishaps, certainly come and go. But I would say over time, though, considering the volume of flying that we're doing, our air crews are performing incredibly well. But that being said, when a mishap happens, we absolutely investigate it. We do everything we can to get the word out to the other operators of that aircraft to prevent it from happening under a safety privilege, as well as doing the accident investigation board to figure out, how we can prevent this from happening. And so we have a really robust safety enterprise. And, but I tell you what, John, flying is a dangerous business. It just is. And despite our technology, despite the incredible training, we train the best pilots in the world right here in the United States Air Force. Despite all of that, we're going to have incidences, and we're going to digest this report, and we're going to figure out what adjustments, if any, we need to make from what we're doing. But we take it very, very seriously.
Just a quick follow-up. Is there a definite correlation, do you think, between the age of the fleet and the increase in accidents, or would you say it's more likely due to simply the op tempo than the amount of hours and the relentless pace of operations without a reset?
Well, John, I can't diagnose from here right now the cause of any particular thing. But I remember, though, in the big scheme of things, in aviation safety in the military side of the house, over time we have drastically reduced the mishap rate, drastically over decades. And it's important not to lose sight of that, even though we'll have flare-ups from time to time. But I can't say, hey, it's correlated to an aircraft fleet. I can't make that correlation here right now, John.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, next up is Steve Trimble. Steve.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask about tactical aviation portfolio shaping. I mean, it's an interesting time right now where you have three different options. You have fourth generation fighters in production and being delivered to the Air Force, fifth generation, and now R&D in sixth generation. And as you look at investment strategy going forward, you've got Block 25 and Block 30 F-16s coming up for retirement in a few years. And as you look at that, previously we would have probably just assumed it would be F-35s that would be purchased to replace those aircraft. But but things have changed the last couple of years. So I'm wondering now how the Air Force looks at what the right balance is between these three different generations of fighter capabilities that you can put money into.
Hey, thanks, Steve. No, I appreciate the question. And, I am the A3 Director of Operations and not necessarily in charge of building the future force structure, but certainly familiar with some of the discussions that are going on. And, we're looking for the best value for our nation, okay, to address not only the NDA, but all the other demands that are placed upon us. Remember, we're doing everything from defending your house right now, and everybody back here in our nation from any particular threat that could come from, this is the fighter force structure, to projecting power in the Middle East where we may need to turn power there, supporting named operations, which takes a certain element of the fighter force structure, as well as being effective against a high-end threat and a high-end IADS. And so we're always looking for that right mix. Well aware that we need that high-end platforms come with a high-end price tag, and trying to get that mix exactly right is something that we're absolutely 100% focused on. But I can't really comment on trades that are pre-decisional right now or shifts that are pre-decisional. But remember what I said, Steve, is that we're in demand. There's not a single aspect out there. There's not a single combatant command, whether it's a combatant command that doesn't face a lot of high-end threats. They want more of our more low-end platforms, to combatant commands that could face a high-end peer competitor. They want the high-end stuff. So there's no one out there that doesn't want some element of fighter air power, Air Force air power.
Okay, Frank Wolf.
Hi, General. Just wondering if you could give us your perspective on some of the drone imaging processing processing that's going on. I know Project Maven obviously classified, but Palantir Technologies, and just if you could give us your perspective, because it's unclear to me, and I think it's unclear to a significant number of people, whether this is in fact whether the capabilities actually work, whether you really need these kind of imagery processing efforts that are going on from full motion video, and what benefit it actually provides to the warfighters on the ground. So I wonder if you could give us your perspective on that and what industry might need to do to improve those kind of things.
Frank, I'm sorry, I got the last part, but what was tell me again the first part of the question, just
yeah,
so
no, sure. I was just asking about the benefits that full motion video imagery processing provides for warfighters on the ground, such as, the classified Project Maven effort, which has been apparently integrated into ABMS. And it's just unclear how much benefit these kinds of efforts really have. And I wonder if you could give us your perspective from an on the ground perspective, what kind of benefits these offer, or what industry needs to do better in that regard, if anything.
Well, Frank, I'm not the best person to ask of that particular area. I will say though that, and I certainly can't comment on anything classified, but I will say though that we absolutely look for technologies that relieve the human burden on the ISR processing, exploitation, and dissemination efforts of the collections that we do, so that the humans are their time and their efforts are used most effectively and most valuably. And so we welcome those technologies, because a big portion of our ISR enterprise is the processing of the collection, not just flying the we always talk about platforms, but the processing of the collection. So any efforts there in AI and advanced technologies to improve that and reduce the manpower associated with that, we're going to clearly want to pursue, if that helps address your question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just on that light, has AI What is the promise of AI in your regard, and along those lines? Do you think what are the major issues with AI going forward along those ISR kind of effort? You could just talk to that.
Yeah, Frank, I honestly am not the best guy. I apologize. I don't have a
That's
better
okay.
answer for you on that one, but thank you for the question, though.
Yeah.
Gus, here's one from that was texted in from Steve Burke that I'm sure a lot of folks are interested in hearing your perspectives on, and that's, could you share your perspective on next generation pilot training to generate combat pilots?
Well, let me say that America needs to know that we train. The United States Air Force trains the best pilots in the world. We have a phenomenal training system, and we have a great record of the pilots we produced. I will say though that pilots are in demand, and not only in the Air Force, but they're in demand globally. Even though we have a lull right now with the with airlines and things like that. Globally, there's a demand for pilots. And so it's important that we most cost effectively train our pilots, but with one thing in mind. We always want to seek the best possible product, and where we can do it more economically and do it faster. And I'll say we've made some great advances in this area. When I think about certain, you and I went to pilot training with a lot more flying and simulators that were very low fidelity, if at all. And now some of the capabilities that we have put some of the young air crews in such a better state coming into the program and emerge so much more experienced, not necessarily experienced in terms of aviation time, but experienced in terms of situations that we could never put them in with the legacy training systems. And so we are teamed right now very closely with the Air Education Training Command on how to develop and evolve pilot training. And and a big part of it is how much of it should be done in simulators, how much of it should be done in more of the lower end platforms, think light, small propeller aircraft, how much of that needs to then migrate to more advanced jet training, and then what tracks exist within pilot training. And so that's something that we're looking at every single day here. That's front and center, because pilot production is core to the Air Force. And we're going to continue to work that and ensure we continue to deliver the pilots we need for our nation.
Very good. Here's one more from an old compatriot of mine, Lieutenant General retired Glenn Spears. It kind of goes beyond pilot training in the initial stages, but more advanced training. And Glenn asks, one key element of readiness is to provide realistic, cost-effective training for our air crews. How will the Air Force conduct realistic fighter beyond visual range air-to-air training in 2021 and beyond? Get down in the weeds, but it's sort of an expansion of the last topic.
Well, no, that's a great question, and our airspace across our nation is an absolute national treasure where we can train and fight unconstrained, because that's what we need to be able to do, is to be able to stay ready for a high-end fight. We need the airspace to fight in those unconstrained, where you can really explore the full capability of a weapon system, long-range missile shots, the tactics, all of that. The problem is, though, is that the technology is getting so good and the airspace is limited to the point where more and more training has to move to a simulated environment. And then we have to get the balance right between actual flying the airplane and the value you get out of airborne training, which can never be replaced. Okay. And how do we balance that with the things we can do in a high-end simulator, where you not only link multiple different bases possibly together, or maybe bring everybody together in like a big virtual red flag, And I know it doesn't sound as cool as the real one, but the training potential there, where you can quickly evolve software, is an incredible opportunity for us to evolve our training. And and I would say something else to think about in the simulation environment. We seek simulators that not only allow us to do high-end training, but allow us to introduce experimentation into the fight, so that the simulators, we can evaluate and explore technologies to see what's most cost effective, what's most what holds the most value for us. And so I share that with you, and that's clearly an area we're exploring. But I will tell everyone that the airspace that we fly in, those training ranges are invaluable to our national security. And we have to be able to preserve that ability to use those ranges.
That's great, Gus. I mean, you bring up a point that is an excellent one, and I think folks don't often think about it, and that is in this simulated environments that you can capitalize on experimentation. At the same time, you're training folks, and so it's an excellent point out there. Listen, I've got one more for you here that is going to be an interesting one. It comes from Jamie Crowhurst, and his question is, Gus, do you think there will be a time when the Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, Surveillance, Reconnaissance, and Cyber and the A3 will merge at Headquarters Air Force? With the operationalization of intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, this consistent demand from COCOMs, wouldn't having an A236 not only create staff synergy, but make us more a focused force provider for the COCOMs? Now, I'm stating that, I'm relaying that as the messenger, okay? As someone who stood up the DCS for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, I have some perspectives, but what do you think for Jamie?
No, that's a great question. And I tell you what, having been in a million staffs, across my career, there is no perfect structure. No matter what you do, no matter how you design it, there'll be seams and inefficiencies. And so right now, honestly, the focus right now is I work in the A3 works incredibly well with the 2.6 right now. We have a lot of matrix organizations where I'll be in a room with staff officers working a project. I may be at the end of the table. The A2.6 may not be in there, but her people are ingrained with my folks, and I don't even know if some of them are in the 2.6 or in the 3 if I didn't meet them personally. And so I would say the staffs are working extremely well together. We have to, because intelligence is operations, and information warfare is operations. And so at the same time, though, we rely on the expertise in the ISR community, the professionals that reside in that community, that have grown up in that community. And so what we try to do, as opposed to looking at a different structure or a more optimization of the staff, right now we're just focused on working what we have as best we can.
I have to tell you, a chill ran down my spine when you said that, because when I became the first Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance, I coined the phrase, in the 21st century, ISR is operations. You didn't know that. It doesn't matter that I said it, but the fact of the matter that you're thinking it and applying it, same thing with cyber, is indicative of the maturation of the Air Force and how far we've gone to stop thinking about, traditional stovepipes. And I think your answer is spot on, personally. You have to have areas of expertise, but when it comes to making decisions, we need to do them in a matrix kind of organizational way to bring in all those elements together. So Gus, we've come to the end of our time. Let me reiterate my thanks to your candid and honest perspectives and answers today to a variety of very, very challenging questions. And the United States Air Force, Space Force, and the nation is very, very fortunate to have you where you are. So thanks very much for this event. And to you and our audience, from all of us at Mitchell Institute, have a great aerospace power kind of day.
Thank you, sir. Out here.
Bet. Out here.